Now, democracy is under increasing threat from conspiracy theories, from fake news, a war of misinformation online. And it's coming right from the top in many occasions. This weekend, President Trump retweeted a conspiracy theory blaming the Clintons for the death of the multimillionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The 66-year-old was found dead in his cell on Saturday. He was not being monitored overnight despite a reported suicide attempt just weeks before. Epstein was facing 45 years in prison on federal sex trafficking charges. Now, McKay Coppins is a staff writer at The Atlantic. His latest piece is called Why Conspiracy Theorists Will Never Believe the Official Epstein Story, and he's joining me now from Washington. McKay Coppins, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Can I just ask you to explain the title of your article? Because it's clear that we've right in the midst of these runaway conspiracies, and it's not just Epstein, and we'll get into others of the dramatic ones that are abroad as well.
Yeah, so over the weekend when the reported suicide of Epstein became public, what I found fascinating was that the initial reaction across social media especially, but also on other kind of high-profile media platforms, was to rush to speculate and theorize about what was really behind this story, what was really behind his death. Now, of course, it was natural to raise serious questions about what went on here, and obviously there are investigations now into that death. But it wasn't just the online fringes, which typically latch onto news stories like this and kind of spread conspiracy theories. It was people who had prominent perches in mainstream media, it was political leaders, and it was even, as you mentioned earlier, the president himself retweeting or engaging in kind of reckless or irresponsible conspiracy theories about what had really happened. And to me, I think that every element of this Epstein story, even before his death, the allegations against him, the known facts of the case, kind of illuminate the reason that conspiracy theorists are able to thrive in this American media ecosystem. And part of it is because, frankly, we have a culture of elite impunity and corruption and institutional failure that has lost the trust and authority that American institutions once enjoyed.
I wanted to get deeper down into that because you wrote basically you don't have to believe in lizard people or baby-eating politicians to understand why so many are looking at our leaders and letting their imaginations run wild. And that sort of, we also heard of an official who said these conspiracy theories in America remind him of what you see in the developing world. I mean, you know, in third world countries where authoritarians or for whatever reason, you know, the whole place often exists on conspiracy theories and they become, you know, de facto truth. But why is that happening in the United States?
Well, I think you have to look back at America's history. We enjoyed a good amount of time where the official gatekeepers and institutions in America enjoyed wide trust from American people. And that included mainstream media outlets, political leaders, police officers, basically all the big pillars of American society were broadly trusted. There were always people on the fringes who didn't trust them, but they enjoyed a lot of credibility. Over the past couple of decades, and certainly in the past few years, you've seen a kind of a very deliberate war being waged against those institutions. And let's be clear, those institutions have had some pretty high-profile failures that have led to their loss of credibility. But you put all these things together, all these factors together, and what's happened is that Americans simply do not trust a lot of the old gatekeepers that used to be the ones who would say, this is the official story, this is what happened. Now, in the case of Epstein, there is an investigation. We'll find more out about him. But one thing that I was convinced of just watching the reaction this weekend is that no matter what official story comes out, no matter how much evidence comes out, there will be a large segment of American society that will simply never believe it and will choose to believe conspiracy theories that either implicate their political or ideological enemies or even kind of kookier conspiracy theories that just kind of validate their broad distrust of the American ruling class.
You know, it's not just this one, as you say. There are other conspiracy. I mean, the latest ones were the Seth Rich conspiracy theory, which we can get into, Pizzagate before that, during the election. And just to remind the Seth Rich one, he was found murdered. He was a Democratic National Committee staffer, and immediately, they started blaming the Clintons, as they do for everything. But what was really, really fundamentally different in this one compared to Epstein was it looked like the Russians were quite happy to use Julian Assange to implicate, without actually saying it, Seth Rich as the person who leaked all the stuff in their hack of the democratic machine, essentially. That is a really different level of conspiracy. A hostile foreign power is doing that. And then using Julian Assange, who poses as a journalist and a purveyor of the truth. Talk about that for a little bit.
Well, and even beyond that, we've seen a wide array of reports about the way that Russians tried to wreak havoc and cause chaos during the 2016 election. Part of what they did was they identified the areas of American society where there was this lack of trust. So they tried to target Black voters who have a natural distrust of a lot of American authority, and created fake news stories and created conspiracy theories and amplified them on social media. There were entire troll farms, people who were literally charged with trying to whip up divisive conspiracy theories and spread them. And more than once they were successful. Like you said, the Seth Rich story is just, I think, one example of this broader area of concern, frankly, that American adversaries are seeing the rise of conspiratorial thinking in America, the rise of distrust in our institutions, and they're using it, they're weaponizing it against us. And I don't think that we've seen the end of that. If anything, I think this upcoming presidential election will see a lot more of it.
And how should one react to Julian Assange, who gave an interview and essentially implied, without out and out saying it in black and white, that Seth Rich was his source for the Democratic hack?
I think that we should react with skepticism to anyone who is has been kind of known to have their own political agenda and to not kind of conform to the normal conventions of advancing that political agenda. Look, I think with a lot of these conspiracy theories, as I wrote in this piece, that there's a reason for the distrust. And I'm not dismissive of people who kind of suspect corrupt machinations at the highest levels of society or government. At the same time, I also recognize that there are a lot of bad faith actors who are going to latch on to that distrust. And I think that, if anything, we need to be more skeptical and more careful about what we choose to believe.
And of course, he was protecting the Russians in this case. But can I ask you, I'm going to play a soundbite from the Attorney General, William Barr, who has basically talked about getting to the bottom of the Epstein death and for justice for his victims.
We will get to the bottom of what happened, and there will be accountability. But let me assure you that this case will continue on against anyone who was complicit with Epstein. Any co-conspirators should not rest easy. The victims deserve justice, and they will get it.
So we've only got 20 seconds. Everybody thought the victim's plight would go by the wayside in this conspiracy. That seems to have corrected that situation, right?
That's right, and I think that frankly is where a lot of our focus and energy should be, is making sure that these investigations continue apace so that victims can get whatever accountability that they can. Obviously, this death it puts a hamper on that, but I hope that we're still able to move forward and learn more about what happened here.
McKay Coppins, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now.